quality of data and data governance structure. So we have two speakers, and we have mentioned the name of chairperson, chair who is supposed to chair was Vivek Singh, but he is not here with us. So I would like to request Amar to chair the session. So Amar.
Now this is again a session which seems to be very crucial for discussion on on the subject. Its title is Data Enabling Systems in the AI in Healthcare in India: Data Integrity, Data Security, Quality of Data, and Data Governance Structure. So it's covering a wide range of issues, and we have a speaker in this. I'll just introduce both of you at a time. Is Danny John, who is a warrior in evidence-based medicine, and he has been looking at evidence synthesis. Is a specialist in that. Works with the Campbell collaboration, based at the Global Development Network, New Delhi, India. His research interests cover evidence synthesis, economic evaluation, health technology assessment, infectious disease epidemiology modeling, health financing in developing countries, health service research, and implementation research. Oh, wide area. So I'm sure we are going to have a very interesting presentation here. So who is going to go first?
So I'm going to talk about is AI in healthcare based on some kind of evidence, and within the evaluation I'm going to speak majorly in the form of cost effectiveness. Is it cost effective? And as a health economist, my major worry would be that what is the opportunity cost lost? We are all here. We are losing our time to work back in our offices. So essentially, does the focus on AI, are we losing the opportunity cost? As Usha said, are we losing the opportunity cost, or actually focusing on strengthening the health system? This is the same argument that we do when people talk about insurance as a universal health and not about universal health coverage, but not as a universal health. So I think that's the main focus in which I'm going to focus on. One, is it based on evidence? And yes, is yes, then is it cost effective? So I'll try to be as little, so if there are some basic concepts of evidence-based medicine, just pardon my explanation. So I just want to have everybody in the same page of what I constitute or say, because I think in India we throw words like data and study and evidence in the same line, which I don't agree, because evidence is an assimilation of a lot of other things, just not data. A single study cannot be governed to make policy, so evidence has to be something else or beyond. So that's the reason that I speak about evidence in a little bit more structured way. I'm part of Cochrane, and I'm also part recently of what is called as the Cochrane Advocacy Advisory Group. This group is now just set up, and I think I'm the only LMIC member in that. The logic of this group is to use evidence in a much more structured manner to govern evidence for policy decision making. And one of the strong things that we are taking up is the whole evidence of health insurance. And I'm leading a Cochrane review right now on whether the insurance has any impact in terms of out-of-pocket expenditure and access to care. So that's part of my work. I'm going to read about two papers. I don't know how many people are aware, but the Lancet has now recently started an edition called the Lancet Digital Health. And I'm going to just flag two anecdotes from recent. These are I don't know why the lower, it's 2019, but the first paper talks about that we will continue to require independent validation of artificial intelligence studies that screen, treat, diagnose disease. The evidence threshold will evolve as technology advances to strive for inclusively accurate AI models in healthcare. So I think the evidence has become important to us. The second is about why, because there are almost 100,000 or almost 1 million apps that's moving around. Picking the right app would be difficult because of evolving evidence. But if you look at the last sentence, the reason I've highlighted is because people are typically relying on use of what is called a star rating system and user reviews in app stores, despite strong evidence that such evaluation methods are actually misleading. So I think this is where I want to start from the entire argument, that whether there is evidence on which apps are being identified. And I think that we need to go beyond the typical star approach. Healthcare has suffered also for the same. We have 5-star hospitals and 3-star hospitals, and nothing means anything as far as quality or access to care is concerned. So the possible uses of AI in healthcare have been much, and if you take the three examples that I've highlighted, one is medical imaging. For me, from a systematic review or of evidence synthesis specialist, I will check, is there a synthesized diagnostic test accuracy done for these algorithms compared to existing standards, right? So that's what I'm going to talk, that's what I think would be important as far as medical imaging algorithms are concerned. The second way, I've taken an example of echocardiography, where you are detecting or diagnosing coronary heart disease. Are there prognostic models which are evidence-based against AI algorithms compared to current standards? The latest group in Cochrane is actually the Cochrane prognostic group. They are both looking at prognostic models. They're going to look at prognostic methods. They're also going to look at prognostic ways of detecting disease. So the prognostic model is a very latent, recent group in Cochrane, where some of us are now trying to figure out. The last is the prediction model. Right now, Cochrane doesn't have a standard or guidance on how to assess the evidence of prediction models. In this case, I've taken the example of neurological conditions, but predicting model standards are going to come nevertheless, because a lot of machine learning algorithms are based on prediction models. I'm a health economist, so I do a lot of modeling, and I know I can churn the model method to suit cost effectiveness this way or that way. So I need some checklist or standards. We use what is called as consolidated health economic reporting standards for reporting health economic studies. We don't have a reporting standard for prediction models or machine learning algorithms as of now. Neither do we have conducting guidelines or reporting guidelines, and I'll come to that in a while. So what is evidence-based medicine? Evidence-based medicine doesn't mean that it's basically where you need some kind of clinical decision, but it's a very systematic approach where you're using best available evidence in form. We consider as an evidence synthesis specialist the systematic reviews coming from randomized controlled trial or any kind of evidence bar kind of evidence would be the standard in which we'll assess. And in fact, just 2 weeks back, Lancet Global Health suggested that digital medicine, which is one arm of the entire artificial intelligence, should be subjected to the entire scientific rigor of a clinical trial if they are looking at as akin to a drug or a vaccine or a device or a technology. So you can't leave that out, and I think that's something that I'm more keen to when I sit with people from technology backgrounds, that please consider these as evidence standards. You can't just assume that this will work in settings that you are planning. So this is the logic of evidence-based medicine, and it requires a lot of steps. It requires steps of answering, formulating proper questions. We use an acronym called PICO, which is Population Intervention Comparator Outcome, appropriate study designs, inclusion, exclusion criteria, and there are strict what is called as MECIR standards, MECIR. MECIR stands for Methodological Expectations of Cochrane Intervention Review. So even if you want to do standards, there are standards in which you report it, and that is important. The reason I'm saying is I see a lot of systematic reviews being published, especially in Indian journals, which are not systematic. And it is one thing that Amar referred in the morning about the entire controversy of Cochrane, is where it was not the method that was the issue. They did identify, but the problem was they did not identify everything that was available on that topic. The other group which published the study, similar study, nothing different, 2 months later, had access to 11 more additional clinical trials, which when added to the existing evidence base, suddenly shifted the entire HPV vaccine from being safe to not being safe. And that is what the whole data part is important. You can't take a small isolated point of data and then put it out and say, let me run an algorithm around it and then I'll use it for prediction. I think we have a huge issue from that. So we've seen it, we call it publication bias. I don't know what data people will call it, but in our case we call it publication bias, that you have not identified all the topics. So so that's another ethical question that I wanted to add to you. Are you looking at all data points that is actually required, or are you consciously cherry picking, for example, as a health economist, that I cherry pick certain data because I want to churn it out. So even if you do the best modeling, you still get what you want. So the question that did I use the right data? Yes, I did. But was it comprehensive enough? No, maybe. I don't know. Then you need to, the third important factor is the critical evidence, appraisal. Now something that is important for evidence-based medicine is you don't need just the evidence, you need high quality evidence. That means I need to assess the kind of quality of studies from which that evidence is being generated. And we use a structured process called critical appraisal. Right now, we just don't have any kind of a checklist to assess what is the quality of the data. We don't have any kind of single parameter. As long as we get data, we churn it, we throw it out. So there are checklists which are used for published data. Ganesh is one of the members with whom I work, and he'll know how rigorous that particular checklists are. It is specific to a study design, it is specific to a particular research question. So if I'm assessing dengue and using a case control, I cannot use it similarly to pick up any other study because the disease might be different. I might use it to check if the other study design is case control specific. So I think these are things that I would be very cautious right now. That is the evidence or the decision that is being used is from this algorithm. Are they looking at quality of the data? Do we have a checklist of some minimal standards to check on that? Of course, the applicability of evidence is so we differ from we call it what is called as real world evidence, which is something that is completely different from what you call as a primary clinical trial. Clinical trials are done in controlled environments. You have a placebo, you check it, you check some effectiveness. Unfortunately, what we don't have is how does that convert into real world, and when you actually put that intervention on the ground, we don't have some mechanisms to do that. And I think algorithms fail also in the same logic, that you might test it saying that okay, this is diagnostic sensitivity, specificity is good, but have you checked on the real world situation and checked in the systems, as what Amar was saying, integrate within the health system and check whether your algorithms actually give you the same predictability, accuracy and validity compared to what you were doing when you were actually assessing them in the first place. I think that is what I would be highlighting in terms of evidence. Now I'm just giving a very simple example just to explain why evidence is not very complicated but very simple. So this is two newspapers. One from the BBC which says 7 a day portions of fruits and vegetables are good, and the second says 10 portions of fruits and vegetables are good. The second one comes from Times of India. Assuming that you can afford either 7 or 10, you are still kind of trying to say, okay, what do I do? Should I eat 7 or should I eat 10? And this is from a newspaper, so most of you will be still reading this, and I keep. So what is the science behind this statement? So if you look at the 7P study, it's coming from a single study, essentially an observational study, right? Which has something called as confounding bias, because they have not taken care of identifying people on which the cause-effect relationship can be actually ascertained to nutrition alone. What I'm telling by that big sentence is they could have picked up people who are already exercising, who would have been already healthy, and if you add little more fruits to their diet, they anyway not have to go, they'll remain healthy and the risk of mortality would be less. So this is a very biased study. You can't base a decision on that. The second study is actually coming from 33 high quality systematic reviews. And if you notice the graph which is called the hazards ratio, your proportion of mortality or risk of mortality, again it's a questionable outcome, but nevertheless they check whether the mortality risk is reduced after say 10 portions of fruit, it plateaus. But I will have more confidence on this study because it looks like 33 high quality studies, it has overcome confounding bias, so somewhere the correlation can be little more stronger compared to what I would have established from a single study. And I think this is what we need for diagnostic test methods for AI, we need for prediction models, because we are using just one bit of method and saying, okay, larger data set, using one single method doesn't necessarily mean that it is more accurate. So why systematic reviews matter? Correlation is not causation, just an example of that. You could also yield a lot of new insights by findings from, we call it subgroup analysis, you can do that. You can also, where enough evidence is produced, and you can also reduce a lot of flaws from a single study. When I started looking for this particular presentation, I did not find a single systematic review of any AI algorithm tested, not a single one. What they have done is what is called as a scoping review. Scoping reviews are there to just understand what is out there on the topic. So people have done scoping reviews to understand what are the machine learning algorithms being used in healthcare, but they have not done a systematic review of all the existing algorithms being used to check, are the different algorithms giving me, what are the different, what is the overall effect, or what is the average effect of those, or are there differences in terms of effects because of various prediction models that we use. So basically, just systematic reviews, a simple way of you need to summarize all evidence to a particular topic, and there's a way to do it. Meta-analysis is one way to approach on that effects. So I'm looking for a forest plot which can tell me that yes, different methods of algorithms can predict it, and we can see what is the diagnostic test. Now coming to economics, which is my second point of comment that I wanted to make is, if health economics is a study of how society makes arrangements on what to produce, how to distribute, I think these questions also look at from the entire health system provision perspective. How much do we actually focus on AI? As I said, there's always something that is lost because you're making a decision here. If you're sitting here, you're losing your time back at home, you're losing your time back at your workplace, and I think that is a question that I ask: is AI taking the attention from health system strengthening, health system performance? And I'm not questioning the entire value of AI. I'm just asking, as a pure health economist, that is there an opportunity cost lost that had I done better because I would have invested the time or the money somewhere else? Somebody explained about polio. Polio, the problem, if you purely do a cost-benefit analysis of the entire polio immunization program, it has actually given negative returns. Because the kind of money that's been pumped in and the kind of value that you got in the end, in typical sense, it is actually negative returns. It's not positive at all. I think we need to agree, we need to clear that AI also doesn't fall in the same domain. So in the morning, I think Anand was also trying, but I think from an economics perspective, it's not about just efficiency, it's about effectiveness and also equity. Is AI going to bring equity in terms of distribution? Is it AI going to bring equity in terms of outcomes? And I think that is very important to consider. And this is an argument that we're doing currently with the government as well. Because the logic that government uses is generalized cost effectiveness. It assumes safely that if it's cost effective to everyone, which is not correct in the context that we're doing. So as a methodologist, I'm right now working on a method to actually integrate equity within cost effectiveness analysis, and we are actually submitting as a recommendation through people like Sundar and Rakhal, who's now part of the Health Technology Assessment India, to actually how government can use equity parameters and not just generalized cost effectiveness to make those decisions. And we use these kind of methods, cost effectiveness or utility or benefit. But I think what is also important is, what about the budget impact? What I meant by budget impact is, for example, when we did a cost effectiveness study of glaucoma screening in India, we found it is cost effective. But if I have to implement entire country to be screened with glaucoma, the country will not be able to afford it. So the question is, cost effective doesn't mean you can afford it. And that is the logic that I don't see any AI studies looking at budget impacts. What is the impact on the budget in terms of feasibility, implementation, training, entire set of things that is needed. And it's not technology. We know that technology also requires an implementation aspects. Those who know implementation research, implementation goes beyond just inputs. It's a lot about process, and a lot of process defines your outcomes as well. But also the last, something that is important is the entire concept of return on investment. Now this is something that absolutely this country doesn't do. In the UK, for example, there is now what is called as return on investment analysis. So if you have to justify breastfeeding, you cannot do cost effectiveness because it is not logical way to approach that. You will say, is there positive return on investment to invest in breastfeeding, because in the future, this is the kind of return that we get. And I think that is a logical question that we should be asking. I get disturbed when people just use economic evaluation as a logic to justify whether it's cost effective. Is there suitable returns of investment for integrating AI? I don't think we have done that. So we are right now figuring an Indian way of doing return on investment for tobacco control, just to justify, if the country invests on tobacco control, what is the return on investment to the country over the next 5-10 years? And I think that is the question that I'll ask: is AI in healthcare? What is the return on investment to that? If I do that compared to what is conventionally being done, which is more positive return? So I think that is the economics that I will be interested in. So I was looking at EU guidelines. Some of my collaborators are mostly in UK and in Sweden, and I found that these are 7 key requirements for what is the ethical AI. And it is questioning about what is important for me from an evidence perspective is the 6th one, which is societal and environmental well-being. And those who know that now New Zealand has now converted its entire budget looking from a well-being perspective. They are not presenting the budget from a population coverage or percentage GDP or any of those logic. So I think I will question from that side. I'll question about human agency, and I think I'll leave the others to other people because they've all looked at all the other aspects. But I'll try to say whether is the societal and the environmental well-being being thought when you're looking at AI. So in clinical practice, some of you are doctors here, but assuming that a model has been designed, it's created ethical, but what is the minimum level of evidence that you need that you use AI in the clinic? For that, an AI which recommends a dietary program for risk of developing high blood pressure would require a different level of evidence compared to a program which requires treatment options for patients in intensive care. If I require two sets of evidence, one for prevention and other for treatment, I'm sure for AI also you need the same level of different, what is called as evidence bar. You can't use the same logic of evidence. So I'm just transferring all that we have learned in clinical medicine and evidence-based medicine and transferring it back to there. So NICE, which is National Institute of Clinical Excellence in the UK, has not created a separate guidelines for AI, but what they have done is they have integrated all the guidelines into what is called as digital health guidelines. Within that, they've incorporated AI. There's a new structure called NHSX, which is now going to start integrating AI within the NHS space. And the Public Health England both have intentions to produce their own AI guidelines. Just to explain the last sentence, those who are journal editors which realize that there are what is called as conducting and reporting guidelines. So if you're reporting a clinical trial protocol, you have to follow the consort guideline. If you're reporting systematic review, you have to use a PRISMA guideline. So there's a group which is now figuring out what is called as a tripod ML, which is basically would be the reporting guidelines for publishing AI studies in medical journals. And Lancet has now just kind of endorsed this process. It's yet to be published, so whenever it is out, those who are keen to publish ML-based algorithms in medical journals, you will have to adhere to these guidelines as part of your publication requirement. So the pyramid of app development talks about 5 levels. The third level being clinical validity, that it has to be evidence-based. The bottom being that it has to have background and privacy and ease of use and data integration. And I was waiting for the day to the time that somebody mentions this, but since morning I've not heard the word that the entire AI should be evidence-based as well. But the pyramid does say that there has to be evidence-based in the entire framework evaluation. But I would add, what about cost effectiveness? This is a country, do we have the resources to actually absorb AI technologies? Because it's not just about the method. We know that a lot of hospital or health management information failed because you don't have internet connectivity in the village of sub-center in Gujarat, for example. Or do you have your mobile phone is not working because your apps was not there. So I think we'll have to think about the entire feasibility, applicability, context before we actually say that AI could revolutionize healthcare, which is what I think the ministry is trying to emphasize. So where is the evidence? Yes, well, there are maps which take care of mental health disorders, but they are also subject to stigmatization. And there's evidence from there inhibiting basically patients from face-to-face care. Smartphone has been tested for non-invasive malaria diagnostic tests, but there's a huge disparity in terms of evidence, or I would also add safety. It's not about just efficacy, it's about safety issues. And I have not seen many clinical trials. I've seen few which have used case control studies in Africa. There are 1 or 2 which have used clinical trials, but the number of clinical trial designs to test ML algorithms, especially in the field of diagnostics, is extremely rare. It has to become more important, and we need to push for that. So the way forward would be greater clinical evidence from randomized trials, improved frameworks to empower both users and healthcare professionals when using AI, efficacy in terms of where you have global guidance and governance, and governing bodies need to support widespread adoption of much needed digital. So there has to be some governing mechanism in which you put these kind of evidences. In the UK, they have started what is called as NIHR Health Innovation Group. Basically, any innovation that comes in the UK before it's absorbed by NHS will go through the health innovation, including all artificial health technologies. Incidentally, the deputy director would be part of a conference that we are arranging in November. So those who want to understand what they are doing in the UK, you can ask me and I can give you more details. But that is where the NHR is focusing, because they know that this is a positive disruption model. They cannot use conventional health technology assessments. They will have to figure out newer ways to do it. And that's why the NICE is taking, NIHR is actually funding a huge portfolio within NICE on how to integrate AI as part of the NHS healthcare delivery system. So my current work I have done to, basically I have, mostly I integrate cost effectiveness as part of clinical trials as well as observational studies. But the reason that I'm not trying to highlight my papers, but what I think is that medical devices are hard diagnostic methods. Some of the AI would be soft medical devices, and if the medical devices are currently expected to be subjected to clinical trials and cost effectiveness, then AI should be subjected to the same. So along with an organization in Calcutta, we've just started to complete a protocol which will look at the detection rate, basically number of positives detected divided by the number of patients screened, and the cost effectiveness of an AI algorithm versus manual detection for diabetic retinopathy in rural India. We're actually using a observational study, a case control study, where we'll be integrating cost effectiveness as well. We're not finished it, so I don't have too many details to share, but hopefully by end of August we should have a protocol. Okay, thank you.
I think he has cracked up on the whole idea of what is meant by doing ethical work in the AI. I think that itself is going to help us quite a lot. Any development in AI, particularly when we are talking about different devices, and there is a big scandal about the medical devices, as you know, the implant scandal. And so these are the devices which are never tested. We don't know the science of it. And as a consequence, without those evaluations, all kind of people are coming in the business and trying to, put it in the system. So I think this is going to be very important. The issue of quality of data that goes in, the way they are, reported, publication bias issue. In addition to that, the publication themselves being controlled by, few major corporates, like 4 corporates controlling almost 60 to 70% of the scientific journals in the world. So, there is another connection that is there. I think we have to look at all of them. So it's a very important thing that we have now on the table, where we'll have to look at the governance of all the kind of data that have been generated. So we go to the next from here. That is from Usha. So Usha Ramanathan works in the jurisprudence of law, poverty, and rights. She has been tracking and engaging with the UID project and has written and debated extensively on issues of technology and the human conditions of freedom.
The question is being fashioned in a certain way where I think it's very important what question we are asking. If we are saying how do we use AI for health, we come up with a certain kind of answer. But if we look at what AI itself is and what is that data and where does it come from, who controls it, who has access to it, like we've been doing since the morning, then it's a different kind of question. So just briefly, my engagement with this came in because of the UID project, and because initially I went into it thinking it's a good idea, like many people feel about AI now. I thought about the UID, saying that okay, they're giving people an ID, that's not such a bad thing. And people need IDs, they can go take it. Those who need it will go take it. But very soon, and it was really very soon, it was in 2009 when they started the project, within a few months it was clear that the talk of voluntary, the talk of, it will be a facility for you, the talk of inclusiveness, all of these things were ways of presenting the project to make it acceptable, but they were not what the project itself was about. And it wasn't hypothesis. It was at a presentation made by the UID AI that all this became very clear, because there were 3 words that, just to give an illustration, there were 3 words that were used which have come to characterize all these technology projects, especially those which are related to the digitization, data, and identity. And those 3 words are unique, ubiquitous, and universal. And they actually form the basis of much of the understanding of people like me about what projects of this kind are. So this very often will be told, oh, you are anti-technology. It's true that I'm not anti, but I don't particularly fancy certain kinds of technologies. They don't interest me. But this is not about being anti-technology, because it's not about the technology itself, it's about what technology is being used to produce and for whom. And it's, I'm giving you the conclusion as it is today, and as it's been for some time now, which is that, and it, if things change, this conclusion too may change. But till then, it is that technology is a question of power. Technology is not a question of just possibility, it's a question of power. And the closeness between the government and companies which are working on technologies makes people just the subjects of this whole exercise. The second thing is that I think, and this has been said before, that there are many experiments that are being conducted now, and they are the two words that we hear very often, and we heard one with Denny too, which is disruption, and the other word we hear is innovation. So the disruption is now, and it's actually, disruption was a very interesting concept when we in the beginning, because there are many things that have become moribund. They are just around in our system because they've been there forever, and we don't know how to throw them out, we don't know what to replace them with. So if there is something that will come and disrupt it and completely change it, because we do need the dead wood to go, then that was an interesting notion. But disruption has come along with this thing called innovation, which basically is about, in the context of disruption, it is that you not merely set in place something in place of something else. So, you will introduce point of sale machine in the PDS shop, or you will ask for the UID to be the identifier for the mobile phone, but you will also ask that any legacy systems that exist should be deleted, so that you burn your boats. The idea is that you should completely migrate to this new system. To do that, all the things that you were saying need to be done. You need to test it, you need to be sure that it works, and you need evidence-based acceptance of this. So what we have found over this period of time is that none of this has actually happened. Many of these are experiments on populations. So it's like they tried it in different countries, and then finally they settled on India because it had the best marketing man and the most blind population. So it's worked here, and we seem to continue to go along that route, because we are told that this is going to be brought in, and then we say, oh, how do we make it work best? Like, that's our business. So I'm going to take away your liberty. How can it be done so that it's gentlest on me? So that paradigm of thinking is something that has come to stay for quite some time. In the beginning, when the project started, there were 3-4 documents that were put in, just very brief, and documents that merely said that we could try these areas too to make the UID ubiquitous. So those 3-4 documents were what were called UID and NREGA, UID and PDS, and UID and public health. That public health document is a 1.5-page document, and you'll find that essentially they say that we must introduce the UID into the public health system, because the public health, if it's there, that will be another constituency to capture and put onto a database. And it's important also to remember that these databases, they need to be constantly updated. And the way these systems are now being brought in, and the way they've been constructed, quite deliberately constructed, and it's deliberate because if you read a document, and I think all of us need to read it many times over, every time I read it I find something new. It's a document of 2011 called the Tag Up document. It's called the Technology Advisory Group on Unique Projects. It tells us, for those who are working on health, you can forget about the specificities of the revenue streams that are being dealt with there. But what is the ambition with the data? That, and who will handle data, and what is the relationship between state and data and corporations and data, that's kind of set out there. So the underlying thing in that is that state has a lot of data which it has no ability to deal with. So private companies will be set up for that purpose, in which governments can have between 26 and 49% interest. These will be called national information utilities, and they will be natural monopolies. But if anybody wants to come in and compete, you can compete, because in a free market you can't say I'm creating a monopoly. So you say it is a monopoly, but you can come in and compete. So this actually, a classic one which you may want to look at to understand how this will look like is to look at the Goods and Services Tax Network. This Goods and Services Tax Network is a private company which is receiving all the revenue data that's coming through. They say between 2 and 5 billion vouchers every month is going through this. And that's what they are going to build their AI on. So there is just to understand what that process of, collecting data, getting the state. So and for cleaning up this data, because the data is going, and for updating it regularly, the best way to do it is, all this while we've had election commission which will come, set up camps, and then they'll say, please come one and all, if you have any mistakes, do whatever. This is not like that. The new systems that are coming in are systems where if you are not reflected properly in the system, you lose out. So if your identity doesn't work, if your representation in the database doesn't work, then that system won't work for you. So you better go clean up your data. They, in fact, in that tag up report, call it a self-cleaning process. That is, the self will go and clean it for themselves. So it's not like the database will self-clean, but the self has to go and clean it. So the burden, if you follow the GSTN system, you'll find that there too, vouchers have to be uploaded. Then if you don't do this, you won't get your money back. The system takes no responsibility. When you're asking about liability, the whole idea is that there will be no liability on any of these systems. So people who lost monies through these transactions, it goes. Sorry, that's your karma. So,
we call victim blaming.
No. It's just called tradition and custom, long usage. So so when you read it, of course, at that time we laughed about it because the UID and public health document said that this would be a killer application for the UID. Then they put, and in each of these areas, different things have happened. In the meantime, that RSBY was already there, and they had tried to get RSBY on board and said that you bring it in this. That didn't happen, so the RSBY has been successfully killed off, and now it's going to be through the UID in this Ayushman Bharat. And soon after that, a committee was set up, and there were a number of people in that, but the two interesting people in that committee on health records, maintaining health records, were TCS and FICCI. So from the beginning, there has been no hiding. We didn't see it, it's our fault. Nobody has ever hidden that this is business interest, and that the businesses will have to come in to deliver services, the businesses will come in to also make business out of it. Because in the tag up report too, they say that once you have all this governmental data and you're a private company, you will do profit, they will do profit making but not profit maximizing, and they will be private interest, private whatever, acting in the public interest. So private companies acting in the public interest. So this is the kind of language. So when, this morning somebody, I think, perhaps you were saying so that it's all said so nicely. It seems like such a good idea that you carry on with wanting to push the idea forward. The poor will get ID, everything will get efficient, it will be convenient for you. And then you say, okay, how do I make this work? So we haven't, somewhere it's been difficult in this kind of conversation to ask basic questions about what on earth is this anyway. So that committee had done its work in 2013. There was that report that was referred to on electronic health records, which has got revised, and in 2016 there has been this electronic health record. Just to give you an idea of the kind of things they say in that. So the document now reads like this: need for electronic health record. For a health record of an individual to be clinically meaningful, listen a little carefully, and it's quite interesting. It needs to be from conception to birth at the very least. I leave the rest to your imagination. As one progresses through one's life, every record of every clinical encounter represents a health-related event in one's life. Each of these records may be insignificant or significant depending on the current problems that the person is suffering from. Thus, it becomes imperative that these records be available, arranged, and be clinically relevant to provide a summary of the various clinical events in the life of a person. An electronic health record is a collection of various medical records that get generated during any clinical encounter or events. With rise of self-care and home care devices and systems, meaningful healthcare data get generated 24/7 and also have long-term clinical relevance. This ambition is huge. Basically, if you're not breathing, if your pulse rate is a little high at home, when the Fitbit does that. So it's literally between the Internet of Things and this reporting systems that are being created. Insurance companies will start asking that if you don't wear a Fitbit, then you're not going to be entitled to insurance. If you're not going to, and all these are internet connected. So we are looking at very safe and secure systems where, for those of us who felt ignored all our lives, we can be known to the world. That's the kind of system that we are looking at. This is the kind of record that they are looking at. So this is the electronic health records. And then having done that in 2016, in 2017 there was a national health policy. In 2018 they brought in the national health stack. When I was commenting on the iceberg this morning, there was a reason why I was getting agitated about the iceberg, because they have actually invaded every system. They are like the parasite that is impossible to remove now, but which we have to remove. Because where did the iceberg come from? The iceberg initially was an agency, it was an organization that was set up in late 2012, because they found that NASSCOM had been taken over by Amazon and Google and all the big guys. So they wanted that this is the time that you're having major changes that are happening. So there should be, Indian technology companies should have an opportunity in this market. So they said we'll move out of this and set up, which was actually a very good idea. So they set up this thing called product niche within the iceberg. But very soon after that, in 2013, 2014, Mr. Nilekani becomes a mentor. People who worked in the UIDAI move over into and all this is for us to see. There is a Google Hangout where you'll see Pramod Verma and Sanjay Jain, among others, discussing what they are doing, and saying, you're talking about India Stack, and saying that it was a problem working inside the government in the UIDAI, because RTI requests have to be replied to, then we have to give CVC and CAG, all these people information. Now when we work outside, we are not answerable to anybody. We create what products we want, and then we evangelize it back to the state. So the government then adopts what it is that they're giving them. So if you look at the stack, India's stack is not, it is a stack of applications that have been created by this team of people who are outside the government, and therefore none of us has any right asking them any questions. But they have a right in every place in government. So you'll find that the latest report of the RBI on deepening financial, whatever the thing is called, not inclusion, the transactions, so that the digital transaction, deepening digital transaction, has Nilekani as the chair and Sanjay Jain. Out of 5 members, these 2 of them are sitting there, and the report gets written, however it gets written. So the thing is also that it's a small group of people who are making all these decisions. So it's not the government, it's not the state. And in 2011, it was already said that the state has no ability to deal with data, it doesn't know what to do with it. So it is important to know who we are dealing with. It's not some, empty space which is just producing all these things for us. So in the National Health Stack report, it's even called the Health Stack. They've even taken away the veneer of it being anything else. So in that they have a whole section, this is the National Health Stack, and they have a whole section on India Stack, where they are talking about Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and mobile, the JAM Trinity. This has been the driving force from openly, overtly, meaning it has been spoken since 2010. When they said, Roti, Kapda or Makan is now passe, hereafter it is going to be the bank account, the mobile phone and Aadhaar. So bank account being Jan Dhan. So that's the JAM Trinity. And when you look at the latest amendment that has been brought in by the government, the Supreme Court had said that you can't use it in mobile, you can't use it in the banking system. So they've now brought it back, because actually the Supreme Court, we empathize with the Supreme Court that was desperately trying to save this project for the government. So they said, okay, Aadhaar is all right. Although the law was wrongly passed, we will make it right. But we can't say yes to these 2. The project is incomplete without these 3. So everywhere you will find that these 3 have to coexist for this project to be complete. The project is not a project of health. It is a project of aggregation of collection of data, aggregation of data, and creating businesses out of this. In any other jurisdiction, this would be seen as completely wrong, because you can't have function creep. I'm giving my data for one purpose, you can't verily go and use it for something else. So you have the GSTN, for instance, saying, okay, now that we have so much data, we are going to create algorithms which will help us identify who are the people who we can give credit to. Which means what? Not that you need credit, but who will I definitely get my money back from. So the idea that you can keep collecting data like this, and all this is done through through using the coercive force of the state. So the state will say, if you don't, your bank account will be frozen. If you don't, no mobile phone for you. If you don't, you'll be put in jail. If you don't put your thing in the income tax thing, you'll be fined and then put in jail. And we don't seem to see that this is not okay. And this is being done, my request actually at this is that we should shed innocence. This is not an innocent project. It may not be a vile project. It may not be malicious. I have my opinion on that. But it is definitely not an innocent, even if it is an innocent project, I don't think we should be accepting this in innocence. That's all I'm saying. I'll just read out another passage, and which is why we also need to read all these documents. We really don't have a choice. The one good thing that happened in my life was that I did a PhD, which teaches you to read all kinds of stuff. It's like at the end of it, you can read anything. So what is it that they want to do with all this data? On page 39 of the National Health Stack, it's a very sweet kind of ambition. Sorry, I'm useless at this, but yeah. Among other things that this project will do, benefits to this, benefits to that. So this comes under benefits to public. Yeah. Under that, you have a thing which says this will potentially place India at the forefront of medical research in the world. What? Ayushman, this National Health Stack. So you collect health data from everywhere, and then that will potentially place India at the forefront of medical research. How? The design is geared to generate vast amounts of data, resulting in some of the largest health databases. And then you always have to have something to soften the blow. So with secured, anonymized, aggregated data. Now, for those of us who are banking on anonymization to take care of these things, I think it's been proved 1,000 times. When you talk about evidence, there's enough and more evidence to show that de-anonymizing takes no time at all, especially with the kind of data that we have. And when we are talking about ubiquity, unique, ubiquitous and universal, ubiquity is about breaking down silos. It is putting this number in every place. Many of us made the mistake of thinking that when they said unique, it was about biometrics. And then we studied the papers on biometrics and found actually biometrics will not work. While we were saying that, the Vattal Committee report came out in December 2016, which on page 123, 124, they say we don't want, and there too Sanjay Jain is on that committee, they say we don't want biometrics for finance, fintech companies and this cashless business. We don't want it. Why? Because there may be connectivity problems, because the machine may not be okay. What they don't tell you is it's already failing in the PDS system. It's failing in multiple places. So you retain it there because you actually want to shut down the PDS system. So you're not going to stop using it there. But you don't want it when you have to conduct business. So you want another two-factor authentication, for which you need to have the mobile phone linked with it. You need you need at least 2 or 3 bits of information that will be ubiquitous and everywhere. So everybody is asking you for your bank details, including here. So I'm sure for a different purpose, but still. So this is one whole set of things. Just a couple more things. The rest can come in the discussion. The other thing is that the extent to which this is driven by private, the interest of private business is something I don't think we just have to learn to see it, because it's, my tragedy is that they are telling us all the time, and we are not listening. We are so trusting. When you talk of trust, we are so trusting. No, everybody is good. Everybody is good, but they are doing some bad things. So in 2013, you'll find that there is on YouTube, you'll find, it's called the Fireside Chat, and it has Vinod Khosla, Shrikant Nadamuni and Nilakani talking. And there is this thing of, so how many people have been building up, applications on the UID system? So they're saying more and more people, you have to build many more applications of the UID system for private business. So when the Supreme Court gave orders saying that you can't insist on this, and at one time they said don't use it, the private company said that only applies to the government, not to us. So they carried on, and they were introduced into the system. When the case was being heard in the Supreme Court, 5 entities applied to the Supreme Court to intervene in the matter, to be heard in the matter. 5 entities, which included the Digital Lenders Association, and Khosla Labs, which has got the, KSA, which is the Know Your Customer Service Agency, which is the link that you have with the UIDAI. They go to the court and say, please don't change the law, don't change the project in any manner because it will affect our business. So it can't get more open than this. So I think we must learn as a basic thing to recognize that all the AI that we are talking about, I mean, I entirely understand where you're coming from when you say that, you're talking to the government, but this is what the government is doing. So you have to be aware of what the government is doing when you're, so if in your position, you're able to tell the government, we can make a good project for you with full security to all the people, and this is how, when you'll delete the data, this is how you'll secure the data, this is the data you will not collect, and they don't follow it, then you know what those ambitions are. So you have to give yourself a chance in that too. The other thing is that, one of the remarkable things that's happened in recent times is that when you look at the first 10 richest companies and the 10 richest people in the world, earlier they might have been dominated by the oil companies. When they say data is the new oil, I'm not sure what they mean otherwise. Oil certainly produced a lot of wars. But apart from that, when they're saying the data is the new oil, they're actually, the technology people have, both the companies and the individuals have taken over the place of the oil majors, and they are now there. Now there is one thing that, that I feel we need to be scared about, which is this. When oil existed, they made money off oil and did what they wanted with it. They destroyed our environment, they did whatever. Here, the technology companies believe, that there are three roles in which they exist. They exist as technology companies. They exist as philanthropists. So they make all the money. They say, oh, everything is free. You can switch on your thing, you're not paying for anything. Then if everything is free, how are they becoming the richest people in the universe? So there's some calculation there that's not adding up. No? So we need to ask that question and find out what that is. And since they have all that money and they're good people, they want to do philanthropy. Then they come into our countries and do philanthropy on health. And then they do it on agriculture. And so it's a question that we cannot not ask. What is it that they are doing with all of this, and what does it mean? But the third is really where it becomes even more, the story goes further in a sense that technology companies are no longer technology majors are no longer dealing with just technology. They are dealing with all that technology can reach. So today you're talking about AI and health because the technology companies have said that we are entering the field of health. And we are going to do that through AI. And we've already established that, I think somebody referred to the Philippines example this morning, where we've already established, and we can find out in Pakistan, we can tell you when there was an outbreak of malaria somewhere, or whatever. Because I think it was pancreatic cancer. We know, like Microsoft, I think it was, which spoke about pancreatic cancer and said that when people were searching 2 years ago for a certain kind of thing, certain questions that they were raising, when those same set of people from that same territory, from that same area, 2 years later were asking questions which showed that they had pancreatic cancer. We could have predicted. Now we can predict when people start asking these questions, we know who needs to be addressed immediately. So we are talking about surveillance at a very different level, surveillance which is being passed off as kindness to us, as something that will set right systems that we as human beings have not managed to do, which you as doctors don't manage to do. So they say we can prevent, and this is the last thing which I'll stop, which is that other than saying rule of law and whatever, but the major problem that, okay, I'll just say the rule of law thing anyway. The thing to remember is when we are comparing ourselves with UK and US, we need to be a little careful, or Europe, we need to be a little careful. See, first thing is here, we are saying innovation, there should be no rules. Why should there be no rules? Because in the US they had no rules, and look, they have Amazon, they have Facebook. In the middle of this, I don't know how anyone has the gall to say they have Facebook, we should also have. But it's said routinely that that's how we want. We don't want this European model which talks about human rights and privacy and all that. Our companies need to be able to innovate. Innovation cannot happen in the midst of rules. Throw the rules out of the window. We will tell you when we are ready for the rules. And we'll tell you what rules will be then enacted. And this is the kind of, system that they're saying we need to follow. So here we've had actually on the UID, we started with no law. In Jamaica, they started with a law. The law got challenged in the Supreme Court, and of course, they said something very sweet for some of us, where they said that the majority in the Indian Supreme Court didn't understand technology, didn't understand what this problem was about. The dissenting judgment fully gets it, and we are following the dissenting judgment. So there are people who understand. It's not like no Supreme Court understands it at all. But here, at no time has any government, it's not just the Modi government, it's also the Manmohan Singh government, when the orders were passed saying you can't make it mandatory, Mr. Nilekani as the head of UIDAI, at that time they went back to the court in September 2013 and said that please allow us to make it mandatory because this project cannot carry on unless it's mandatory. And the court said, no, we are not changing our order. So they said, okay, you don't change your order, we'll continue doing it anyway. Does anyone remember a time when it was not mandatory after it started being mandatory? So this is the lawlessness of it. So you don't make a law, and then you make a law as a money bill. And then when part of it gets struck down for private companies, you then pass it as an ordinance. An ordinance is only for constitutional necessity, not because my friends want something from me. But you've had, this level of lawlessness across governments is a striking thing, and it is completely assisted by companies who say we are not bound by these laws. If the government gives it to us, we will take it. So this is the kind of paradigm within which we are discussing artificial intelligence. That's all.
Sunita, you all know about, she has in the morning introduced herself, so I'm not going to go in detail of it, but she's from Forum for Medical Ethics Society, and she heads the institution of the Forum for Medical Ethics Society, and she's also, I think, secretary and director of the center. So she is going to talk about ethical, social, and cultural (ELSI) issues in the AI.
I really wanted to give a flavor of what are the ESC programs or LC programs for the at least 2 or 3 big health programs around the world. And both here, myself and Anand, we had been part of one of the ESC programs on grand challenges in global health, and we have Harish here. I'm not sure whether he was part of when he was there at that point in time. So I'm really taking this opportunity to introduce the ESC as a concept and a program. And my sort of little objective here is, can we think along those lines? And these are generally accompanied, these programs accompany the big innovations, and grand challenges in global health is one of that. You can think of the Genome Canada or any of those genomics projects. And generally there is a sentiment that these programs have helped to preempt ethical, social, regulatory challenges. And I must also admit that the kind of paradigm that Usha you are referring to, or Amar raised the issues about health system, I would still feel this is a smaller component, and this really doesn't deal with those kind of mega large paradigm questions. So these are the limitations, and at the same time I would say that 2 or 3 qualifiers here. Health technologies have been here with us for ages, and the common people have contributed. If you look at the health technology, history of health technology, and there's a sort of a very nice historical, a book which documents the historical development of people's role in technology as a whole, but also health technologies. So many people have contributed to development of technologies, and at the same time we sort of my personal sentiment is AI is going to be here. It's unstoppable. So like what we've been talking about, the globalization, and we couldn't really stop globalization. So AI is going to be here, and if that's the case, we shying away from engaging with the difficult questions, issues like ESC is not going to help us. So these are sort of attempts that we need to really start talking about it and ask difficult questions and not shy away from that. So it's a fairly simple presentation that I have. I said, it's 6 or 7 months that we've been preparing for this workshop, and I don't know if people can imagine how much preparation goes into these kind of things. I would like to start with a little story here. This last December, one of my close friends, my college friends, had undergone nephrectomy, and everything went well, is what the feeling was at the end of the day after she underwent surgery, etc. A little kind of a fat person, and we were all happy. I went and accompanied her a couple of nights in the hospital, etc. After 8 days, she was very observant about her symptoms and health, and she felt there's no change, and the symptoms really kind of continued to be there. So she went and met with her general physician and the radiologist, her regular radiologist. To her surprise, the kidney was not removed, and we were shocked. And I'm not exaggerating. This is last December, and we were absolutely shocked. Nonplussed, we didn't know what to do. One of my close friends, family friends, was involved in the surgery, very, very well-meaning, and all of us were talking, good people they land up doing something which is kind of, beyond one's comprehension. A lot of things happened, and to cut the story to a short one, is that they told us that, we should have done X thing, which was something like some imaging, etc., etc. We didn't do that. And we removed a piece of kind of, something else in the body part, and we assumed that was a kidney. And our mistake was, because the person was slightly kind of fat, we didn't realize that we had to do that particular X diagnostic. And if we had done that, we would not have landed up with this problem, right? And why I'm telling this story is, despite being expert, very well-meaning surgeons, and there were 3 surgeons in the room, and there's a lot of other things happen. But coming back to the AI, and when I look at these kind of cases, all of us teach research ethics and clinical ethics, because as part of the FMS initiatives. And every time we talk about the medical negligence and medical error, doctors really don't like to talk about it, because they just feel, it's human error and that happens, and we should be excused from all of that. We shouldn't raise questions about it. I think medical error is understandable, but negligence is not acceptable, and this was clear case of negligence. And this case really tells us that what could be the challenges when we introduce AI in healthcare, and we just need to, when we heard a lot of interesting, really very in-depth, insightful presentation during the day. But this concern, if you come from a perspective of a common people's perspective, this question would really stand, and it would really make us anxious, and it should really make us anxious. So if that's the case, then could there be something that we can take an approach of preempting the problems? And ESC is one way of preempting these kind of challenges whenever there is a health technology related, or the technology is high-end, high-risk technologies in healthcare. So there are some of the questions that we've been discussing the entire day, and I had put them across thinking that I might have to do the introduction in the morning. And that really shaped these questions really shaped the entire program for today. And I think I must really highlight a couple of these things, I wondered, who should be the stakeholders, who should really decide whether AI should really be brought in the gamut of kind of, healthcare service provision. If you look at the current scenarios, and we've talked about the health status or the health system, the way we function, one of the critical questions that comes to our mind is, who is going to really get benefited from the AI? Is it going to be affordable to everybody, or is it going to be another elitist kind of, a technology which can be used only by a certain segment of population? And it really goes to, the hashtag that has been used in the NITI Aayog policy paper, which Navneet referred to in the morning. They've said AI for all, and that needs to be really looked at more carefully. Is it really going to be AI for all? And it's very intriguing. If anybody is interested here, and probably CPS can do a critical review of that NITI Aayog's policy paper. The whole conversation conversation is around the economy. And Usha, as you said, about the data and the value of data and how it is kind of, we could be the leading kind of, India could be a leader in technology development. Then there's a little few lines which talk about somewhere justice and equity. There's little word about ethics. And that bothered me, and that should really bother all of us. That, if that's the policy document of the government think tank, it should really worry us, So I think that was one of the things that kind of, made us think about this, and that's how we are here. So as I said, medical errors, that was the example I gave, the way the public health systems and the programs work, and we heard like Denny said, and kind of things that are happening on the ground. We all talked about, and we are very well aware about the data breaches, hacking, stealing, leakages, and all of that. We also heard during the day data commodification, and it's very central piece in the today's world. Data management systems, and I think Navneet made reference to that how we are not really equipped having robust data management systems. And I think most of the time health technologies are functioning suboptimally for various reasons. And if that's the case, it should really made us think about what can we really think about the ESC programs and the frameworks for AI as well. And we also heard Anand talked about the ESC issues in relation to AI, because there's a lot of literature on the ethics of AI. In the I don't think there's a lot of literature and scholarship in India as yet, but there are policy papers on ethics of AI outside of India. I remember, of course, Anand talked about it, and then you also made a couple of references to the ethical issues of that. What I'm going to do is really briefly talk about these three programs, and there's a chronological order. It's all a little messed up, but HapMap is one of the oldest programs. Then Genome Canada has a lifespan of about 20 years. It was established in 2000, and it has one of the most respected ELC, which is called GELC program. And the third one that we were part of it is the Grand Challenges in Global Health, and we were part of the ESC team at the University of Toronto. So this is the HapMap, and we don't have to really, I'm not a genesis, would find it difficult to explain what HapMap is, but these are some of the highlights of, it's basically a scientific effort to identify common genetic variations, etc., etc. It's one of those big, large investment that has gone into HapMap project. But I think the text that I've highlighted in red is something which is relevant for us for today's conversation. Project represents collaboration. So collaboration is kind of, it's almost an inevitable thing in today's world. The second point is the data from project does get kind of shared, and everybody, it's really used and available for the research. I think the second point there was data from the project will help researchers find genetic differences, etc., for particular medicines or the environmental factors. So I think the relevance of the HapMap is probably cannot be questioned, possibly, but there are issues around the data is being freely available, and this is one of the oldest kind of a thing, and I don't think at that point in time, the kind of conversation we are having about data privacy, people's rights to privacy and human rights were really being discussed during that period. So this is Genome Canada, and you all can Google these kind of things. But I just wanted to highlight that GE, it's called CUBE because it's sort of ethical, environmental, and economic aspects, and there's a social aspects to this. And this is one of the largest program, and I think it still remains to be the largest. It was established, the Genome Canada was established in 2000, and I wanted to highlight, these are some of the things about the LC program of the Genome Canada. It investigates questions at the intersection of genomics and society, and I thought, this is an opportunity for all of us to think about the public engagement areas, talking to the common people or the stakeholders, and find out what their understanding is of AI, and do they find it relevant in the current context of the way our health systems are organized and the way they are delivering the healthcare to people. Provide stakeholders the insights from a broader societal perspective needed to anticipate impacts of scientific advances in genomics. Once again, as I said, it is a preemptive approach. It avoids pitfall, enhances trust building, enables critical thinking. And I would really like to underscore here, if you look at the literature on trust today in the healthcare setting, it seems there's a lot of deterioration between what happens between healthcare providers or the healthcare system and the patients. And if that continues to get eroded, we are going to find it really difficult, And some of these technologies, if you introduce without being adequately mindful, it is going to really contribute to worsening affecting the trust relationship between the healthcare system and the users of the healthcare system. And this goes without saying, these programs and the people who have worked on these programs are working on it's very multidisciplinary, and this is what also we did on the ESC program on the GCGH. And generally there's an understanding that it helps bridge gaps between genomic researchers and the other stakeholders. I also wanted to highlight that by the time this review was commissioned, 2017, so by then it was 17-year-old initiative in Canada, and they undertook really an evaluation of this program to understand, are we just feeling happy about that, there is a LC program and, everything is all well, or is it really contributing something to make the program people-centered and, protecting the dignity of masses and people who are involved into this project. And there's a project which just kind of, the report has come out in 2018, very recent developments on Genome Canada. And these are the recommendations, and just kind of it's important to note that it affirms that the value and vision of integrated LC program or the research is really contributes to enhancing these kind of innovative health technology projects. That was the only message I wanted to give here. Now, this is a GCGH program that myself and Anand were part of for about 6 to 7 years. This was a big team, and once again want to highlight the fact that multidisciplinary. You'll see, of course, no one would know who these people are, but probably we can see that it was a multinational, and people really came from varieties of disciplines. And these were the two objectives, the entire grant, and I think it was quite a big grant that we had got, and it was located at the University of Toronto. We were about 20 of us working in both physically in that office and also virtually around the world, in Africa and Asia particularly. And one of the main objectives was to provide advisory services to GCGH projects on ethical, social, cultural issues in the short to mid-term. And I would like to just say a few things here about the GCGH. These were, there are about 44 high-end biotechnology projects were supported by Gates Foundation. And this was around 2003-04. And they were, before they received the grants, they underwent ESC review by this team, before I joined this team. And then there was an understanding developed that all these 44 health biotechnology projects would need ESC support, and there should be a team to do that. So once again, like how Genome Canada had a accompanying project which is called the GLC. So this was the ESC program which accompanied for the entire period of GCGH for those 10 years, and this was between 2006 and 16. So in a way, I would like to underscore that these are resource-intensive initiatives, and to my mind, they're helpful. And in India, we haven't really warmed up to this whole concept of having ESC programs for any health technology. So AI is, I'm just taking this as an example, but even in the past, if you look at what's happening to any high-end, stem cell research or any of those kind of things, but I don't think we've been really engaged with the ESC issues as such. we did a kind of a qualitative. I would also like to introduce this whole concept. Well, some of you might be familiar with this, but this whole concept of those people who come from technology background probably are familiar with this lab to village notion. And you know, this entire spectrum, there are several phases when you start the bench science, and then you know, kind of introduce the technology or deploy the technology actually in the field, you know, and it's a fairly long journey, complicated, complex kind of, you know, stages of the development. This we did a key informant interview-based qualitative research, and these were some of the areas that people sort of, you know, told us. So there are 4 domains we can see: politics, science, ESG indeed came up as one of the areas of concerns, and of course there was finances, and there are lots of other details. And I would like to use this example. So this was one of the projects from those 44 projects where the entire collaborative initiative wanted to try out the genetically modified mosquitoes, to look at them as kind of, you know, as a mechanism to control malaria. So one of the thing was how do you select a site to do these trials? And I think one of the scariest part, I even feel scared even now, was at one point in time in the journey from lab to village, the scientist or the researcher were expected to release these genetically modified mosquitoes in the open space. And that was really a tricky part. So then you have to find a piece of land or the communities where you can really try this out. And this was done in Mexico finally. I would just like to highlight that, you know, that entire research team had invested a lot of time, and this was one of the publication came out of all that engagement between us at the ESC team and the research team, as how much it went into engaging with the study communities, where finally, you know, it was selected as a site for this study, looking at the, you know, the ESC issues and what could be the concerns of the communities and how they could be addressed. There could be critique of the public engagement and community engagement, and one has to be really careful about, I think there's a little blurred line between community engagement and are you selling your products and the technology, or are you really getting them on board, and is it genuinely a collaborative initiative? So that could be a concern here, and it could really be a critique of that. So these are some of the things that came out. One was the regulatory stream that we engaged with them, and the community engagement. And there are some other case studies that I wanted to just flag, that we provided support, ESC support to these different projects. And one was lab to village, and you know, I think, you know, issues on commercialization, it's kind of, you know, awkward terminologies, but well, this was a vaccine technologies, and sort of they wanted us to support them in understanding in a better way as how we can sort of, you know, cross that pathway for that village. Yeah, and that's my last slide. Yeah, and I think, you know, my appeal here is to, could we think of developing the ESC programs for AI technologies? Because AI is going to be here, and then we need to really ask those awkward, difficult questions without shying away from that. Yeah, I'll stop here. It's kind of predetermined groups, and we have prepared about 4 to 5 questions. And we actually wanted to close at this juncture. I mean, that's how I kept my presentation last, because the 3 areas are, we want the groups to discuss on the ESC issues and the governance issues and public engagement, which actually we didn't really talk the whole day. I mean, we kind of, you know, touching base with it, but public engagement is another area.